Hey guys, what's up and welcome back here for another episode with some Pot Limit Oma content. Today we're jumping into a session that I recently played on GG Poker, PLO 50, 2 tables of Russian cash. I would say let's jump straight into it. If you guys like this content, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out plomastermind.com if you want to learn more about the great game of Pot Limit Oma, not only by myself, but also by all the other coaches that are in the PLO Mastermind. So I would say, guys, let's jump straight into it. We are opening up 2 tables, and let's see what the action will be. If needed, we're going to look deeper into some hands on the left side. Very standard call. Against an under the gun open, we have, with the ace-high suit, a hand that is definitely strong enough. Now, this board on the left is definitely a board where we could consider leading some of our hands in our range, but this hand simply doesn't have enough equity or blockers to consider doing that. So just a check and then a fold. But keep in mind that on these low straight boards, especially against a tight range, you usually want to have a leading range. Queen 10, 5, 4 on the left. That is a hand that I'm going to fold. A little bit too weak from under the gun, of course. And on the right side, I would say this is a hand that I like to see myself defending. It's not a great hand since we don't have the ace-high suit, but we do have enough connectivity, I would say. Now, against quite a large bet on the right side, it's a little bit tricky. Yes, we have the rep, but we don't have a spade. We don't have a backdoor flush draw. And against his value range, my hand will become very tricky to play. We will get dominated by higher reps and straight draws, hands with a flush draw in there, and of course a ton of mate hands in there. So it will be a little bit difficult to continue on turns and rivers. Against a large bet, therefore, I don't mind the check fold, to be honest. I don't mind it. I would check call, for example, if I would have 2 hearts there. On the left side, I have an easy open with ace, king, 7 deuce, double suited. This hand has 2 powerful blockers with the ace and the king, and of course we're double suited. So definitely in the cutoff a hand you want to raise. On jack 10, 4, rainbow, I flop a gutter and 2 backdoor flush draws, and I decide to c-bet. I think I like the bet. The fact that we don't have showdown value, but we do have some equity helps. And also we have 2 backdoor flush draws, which is good. Now the thing is, I have a 7 in my hand, which specifically is not that great because I want my opponent to have some of these mid-high rundowns that he's folding against the bet. So I do block some of his folding range. I do want to take a little bit of a deeper look into this c-betting decision. This is jack 10 deuce, same scenario. The board is a little bit different instead of jack 10 4, but I think it's close enough. Now, in theory, you can see that we are supposed to bet 49% of the time for 3/4 pot. Now, if we look into my specific hand, which is ace, king, 7 deuce, of course, we cannot use this hand because then we block a deuce. But let's say we have ace, king, 7, 3. We can see that my hand is splitting quite a bit between checking and betting. However, if we filter for 2 backdoor flush draws, we can see that my hand starts to lean a little bit more towards a check. Although if we only have 1 high backdoor flush draw on the top right, for example, ace, king, 7, 3, we can see that this hand is more leaning towards a bet. So I think in the end, it doesn't matter as much. I think more importantly, the concept, the idea here that we're betting 49% of our range here. Keep in mind the principles for betting, right? With our value, we want to have high equity hands that play well on turns and rivers. With our bluffs, we want to have some sort of equity, but also blockers to my opponent's folding range. So keep that in mind, and now let's get back into the hand. And my opponent makes the call. Turn is the 10 of clubs. Not a great card specifically for my hand, because A, I don't pick up any equity, and B, I don't block any of the pairs on the board. So I do think checking here in general is the play. I would rather bet a hand either with 1 or 2 clubs or with a blocker to the board. My opponent ends up holding 4-4, flopping a set and turning a boat, and we lose that specific pot. I think he plays it okay. He could consider like to donk small on the river there, try to get some value from a flush. On the right side, I have a 3-bet with ace, ace, king, deuce. We flop a gutter No backdoor flush draw. Let's see. I think that on this board, the out of position player should have some leads. Now, it's not that he has a ton of 5-6, but he will definitely have some hands that connect here. And also my range is struggling to have a lot of great hands. So the out of position player can leverage that by putting some aggression on me. He leads out for a 1/3 pot. I think I have an easy call. I have an overpair and a gutter. This is too strong of a hand at this point to consider folding. I don't think we can raise. Our hand doesn't do well against his value range. So let's just call, play a turn in position and see what happens. In theory, the out of position player is supposed to lead out 25.5% of the time for a half pot. There are a lot of hands in there, that are very strong and have decent playability in case they get called. But also they unblock some of my continuing range as the in position player. So for example, you can see that a hand like 7-7-6-5, so we have a set and a straight as the out of position player. This hand is a check. It's just too strong to consider leading out, and we block too much of the in position player's continuing range, so we check. However, on the other side, a hand like 10-8-6-5 on the right side, we see that this hand is supposed to be a lead out. We have a hand that can lead out for value. We have the nuts. And we have a hand that plays well on turns and rivers in case we get called. Plus, we unblock all the pairs on the board, making it more likely that the in-position player is capable of continuing. So the out-of-position player leads out for half pot. In the actual hand, he leads out for 1/3. But let's still look into the theoretical response by the in-position player. We can see that there's not that much raising, only 11.7% of the time. And I think that makes sense, right? The in-position player with his 3-betting range simply doesn't have a lot of great hands on this board, and therefore he cannot allow himself to raise very often. He needs to make sure that he calls the majority of his strong hands to overcome the fact that his range is not necessarily in a large advantage here. So for example, a hand like 5-6, we can see that the nut straight at this point is purely calling and we're never supposed to raise. What about 7-7? If you flop 7-7, you're also supposed to only call in this scenario. What about ace-ace? This was the hand that I have in game. You can see that ace-ace is only folding 12% of the time in position. And the hands that we are folding are the very weakest ace-ace combinations, specifically if we don't have a backdoor flush draw. So if we have ace-ace king-deuce, which was the hand that I was holding, with a backdoor flush draw, we can see that this hand is supposed to be a pure call in position. I make the call. Turn is the 9 of clubs. Not a great card for me, especially if we face another bet, we will have to fold. Luckily, my opponent checks. And I have a very easy check at this point. I have showdown value because I have a pair of aces. And I don't really have a strong enough hand to consider betting for value. I don't want to turn my hand into a bluff, so let's pot control, especially since we're in position. River is the 9. Pretty good card for my hand, especially since my opponent now checks twice. I think we do have the best hand at this point most of the time. Value betting is a little bit thin, at least in the sense of like what hands am I gonna get called by. But still, I do believe I have the best hands almost always, so let's bet and see what happens. On the left side, I decide to open raise pre-flop Jack 10 7-6 single suited with the 7 high suit only. I think this is too loose. In the cutoff, we are supposed to open raise 31.3% of our hands. Now, a hand like Jack 10 7-6 single is therefore marginal, I would say, and it's very questionable whether or not that hand belongs into that 30% range. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the categories, and the categories are built into PLO Trainer to recognize patterns very quickly and efficiently. We're grouping hands together here with similar characteristics so you as a user can find patterns. So let's look into unpaired single suited hands. These are all hands that are unpaired single suited, and also Jack 10 7-6 is an unpaired single suited hand. We can see that this hand class is open raising 24% of the time. We can open up this category and break down all the unpaired single suited hands further. We can look at suited ace high hands, offsuit ace high hands, connected and disconnected hands. And we can see different open raising frequencies for each of these categories. Now Jack 10 7-6 belongs in the connected category. and I can open that one up to look deeper into it again. We have rundowns, near Broadway hands, 3 low with a Broadway and non-Broadway hands, and again we see different frequencies. Now Jack 10 7-6 belongs into the category near Broadway. 4.2% of all the hands belong into this category. For example, a hand like King Jack 10-8 is a strong hand, much stronger than Jack 10 7-6, and that hand we are open raising. Let's scroll down a bit. A hand like Queen 10 8-7, also a hand with 2 gaps, we're also open raising this specific hand. King Jack 10-3, we're also open raising that hand. So you can see that these hands that I'm pointing out are already a bit stronger and higher card heavy than Jack 10 7-6. And if I filter for Jack 10 7-6, we can actually see that all the variations that are single suited are supposed to be a fold. C-betting on the left side, I think it's okay. Usually open-ended straight draws without anything else are a high frequency check back because we don't want to get check raised off our equity. But on an ace-high board that is pretty good for my range, we can allow ourselves to do a lot more betting, of course. And then on the left side, ace jack 10 deuce single suited. This will be a hand I'm gonna defend against, especially against the min raise. And on 7-6-3, this is again kind of a board where as the big blind player, we can have some lead outs. Whenever you are in a spot like this and a board favors your range versus the range of your opponent, you have reason to lead out. At least that's a pattern that you will see very, very often. And the reason is because your opponent struggles to find continues on a board that doesn't really hit his range. But you, in this instance, me in the big blind, will have enough strong mate hands and hands with equity, like high equity draws. And therefore, we want to lead out because the opponent of us is not necessarily going to do the betting for us. So we want to build a pot. And therefore, you also want to make sure that you add in some bluffs. And I think this combination, ace jack 10 deuce, is kind of interesting. Like we have a backdoor straight draw. We have the ace of hearts. So we have some blockers and a little bit of equity. But also we have a hand that is not strong enough to check call, but also not capable of check raising. We don't have enough equity and the stack sizes at this point are too shallow to do anything else. So I think leading out here for half pot is pretty nice. And I think the in-position player will, for example, make the mistake here by over folding against a lead. So let's see if I did decide to lead out. I do. On the right side, in the meantime, it's a fold. And on the 8, this is pretty much one of the best cards for us. Brings in more straights. My opponent will struggle on a lot of straights. And of course, we have the nut flush blocker at this point that we want to utilize and therefore continuously barrel. So we bet and the in-position player makes the fold and we take down the pot. On the right side, we have a fold with Queen Jack 10 single, a little bit too weak. And on the right side, Queen Queen 10 7. I do like this hand, but of course it depends on the action, right? Like everything is relative. Like here against a limp and an ISO raise, it's a little bit tricky because we do face a tight ISO raise player, 17% VPIP only. And my hand is quite disconnected still, even though we have some connectivity, right? Like it's just not that strong. However, we are a little bit deeper than 100 big blinds and we are in position. So I don't mind going for a call, but I also wouldn't mind just folding. Also thinking about the rake in this specific game. So it's pretty close. It's pretty close. If I would face aggressive players in the blinds, I would definitely make the fold because I don't want to see a squeeze. But in this instance, we do go for the call. Let's see what is going to happen. I'm going to check on this flop. Like we have equity with the gutter. We have showdown value with the queen. I think exploitatively, it's not that bad to go and take a stab. And on the turn, it becomes like very appealing now to bet. Even though I have showdown value, like the chances my opponent will have aces or kings is pretty high. We have a 10 blocker, which is quite valuable. And I think my opponents will almost never have a flush here because they will lead out the flush themselves on the turn. And on the left side, I think I decided to check raise. Let's take a look into that. So we go back quickly. We defend pre-flop. This is a decent hand to come in for a check raise. We have some equity. We have strong blockers. And on the turn, once we get called, I would say we definitely want to bet here because we pick up equity. We block the nut straight and our showdown value is quite marginal. We have a 10 basically, which is not that much. The turn is somewhat neutral, I think, for the ranges in play. We will have some queen 9 and some 9-7 here. But my opponent can also definitely have some of them that he bet calls. Luckily, we bet and my opponent makes the fold. He will also still have plenty of like over pairs, for example, with a pair blocker that will bet and then call against the check raise, but will have to fold against the barrel on the turns. On 10-8 for Rainbow in PLO Trainer, we can see that the big blind is supposed to check raise 16.8% of the time. And that's a very, very high frequency, right? It's very likely that the majority of players in the pool under check raise. And often this is because they miss out on their check raise bluffs. Now, the reason why we have to add in bluffs into our check raising range is because otherwise our value will not get paid off, right? If we check raise only 10-10 and 8-8, the in-position player will have a very easy time by just folding everything against the check raise. And the reason we check raise is because we want to get value from our good hands, right? So we need to find some bluffs in order to balance that out and make sure that our value gets called. When you think about a 16.8% check raise range, we can first of all see that a lot of the sets are check raising 79% of the time. You can see it here. Also, a decent portion of our two pair hands are being check raised, specifically top two pair. It's a high frequency check raise. But where do our bluffs come from? If we look into the one pair hands and we specifically focus on top pair, we can see that top pair is being check raised 27% of the time. Top pair with a straight roll is a 41% check raise. And this is the hand or the hand class that I was check raising. So let's take a look, because we will have some check raises for value with 10x with a straight roll, but we will also have some check raises that will fold against a shove by the in-position player. So a hand like Queen, Jack, 10-9 is a clear check raise for value, right? Top pair, rep, all in all, beautiful hand. Let's scroll a little bit down here and look at the EV in the middle. I'm going to find hands with a quite low EV, and those hands will function as our check raise bluffs. So for example, 10-7-7-6. Let me actually filter like this. This is a hand that is an 81.3% check raise. And this hand will not stack off against a shove. A hand like 10-9-6-6, this was the hand that I had. This hand is supposed to be a pure check raise. You can see on the right side, we're basically check raising all of these combinations. If I remove this and we scroll again down a little bit, a hand like Queen 10-9-9. So we have top pair, we have a nut gutter, but we have the 9 blockers. This is a hand that we are check raising very often. So you can see that if you have that pair blocker in combination with straight blockers and a little bit of equity, you have a high incentive to go ahead and check raise, put your opponent in a tough spot and build a pot. So we take down the pot on the left side, guys, and that is also gonna be it for this session. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions, comments, or feedback. And of course, subscribe to my channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out plomastermind.com if you want to learn more about Pot Limit OMA. Guys, thanks for watching, over and out, and I will catch you in the next one.